There was a period in my life where I looked around and realized that almost everything had changed. Not gradually, not one thing at a time in a manageable sequence I could process as I went, all at once. Friendships that had gone quiet, the community that no longer felt like mine, the family conversations I was showing up to but no longer truly present in, the version of myself that those people knew and loved and needed, she had been leaving for a while. And I had been so busy becoming the new version that I hadn't quite registered the loss of the old one. And then one day I did, and it was a lot. Because here's the thing about outgrowing people and places and whole chapters of your life that nobody really prepares you for. The grief doesn't wait for the thing to be fully over. It starts in the in-between, in the place where you know, but you haven't left yet. Where you can feel the distance growing, but the people on the other side are still right there. Still calling. Still expecting the version of you that no longer quite exists. And you love them. That is the part that makes it complicated. You love them. They're not bad people. This is not a story about villains. It is a story about people who are where they are, and you are where you are. And those two places are no longer the same place. And love, real love, does not automatically close that distance. Today we are naming this grief. The grief of the living. The grief of the in-between. The grief that has no funeral, no ceremony, no moment where someone hands you some flowers and tells you how sorry they are. I'm Neeka. This is unapologetically us. Real talk, no apologies. And if you're standing somewhere in the middle of this, knowing you've outgrown something, but not yet fully through it, this episode is for you. You're not alone in the in-between. I promise. I want to describe the feeling because I think a lot of people are in it without having the language for it. Outgrowing someone doesn't usually announce itself. It doesn't arrive as a dramatic revelation. It's more like you notice, gradually, that a conversation that used to fill you up now leaves you flat. That a friendship you used to look forward to now requires a kind of preparation, a settling of yourself into an older shape. A performance of a version of you that fits the space they have for you. That you leave the interaction not fed but tired. Not more yourself but less. And you ignore it at first because you love them. You have history. Because you know the good version of them, the real version, the version that showed up when it mattered. And you tell yourself you're being unfair. You're being too much in your head. You're in a season and it will pass. But it doesn't pass. The feeling gets more specific, more persistent. And slowly, painfully slowly, you start to understand that this is not a season. This is a shape. You have grown into a different shape, and the relationship was built for the old one. The you've changed moment is usually when it becomes undeniable. Someone says it, a friend, a family member, someone from the community, and they say it like an accusation. You've changed. And they are right. You have changed. That was the whole point. That was the work you have been doing. You changed on purpose. You fought hard to change. You are proud of the change. But the way they say it, the particular tone, the disappointment underneath it, the implication that the changed version of you is the wrong version, that lands somewhere, even when you know they're wrong, even when you have the language and the therapy and the self-awareness to understand what's happening. The accusation of having changed still lands because some part of you, the part that was formed in those early relationships, that part learned love meant staying recognizable to the people who loved you first. That part hears it as you left, you abandoned us. You think you're better now. You're not better. You're different. You're more yourself. And being more yourself is not a judgment of people who are still becoming. It is just where you are, and you're allowed to be there. I want to talk specifically about outgrowing the communities and institutions that formed us. Because for a lot of Caribbean women, the church was not just a place of worship. It was the social architecture of your entire life. It was where your community lived, where your mother's friends were, where your identity was partially constructed, where the values and the language and the framework for understanding the world were handed to you. When you outgrow it, when the theology no longer holds, when the community values come into direct conflict with who you are becoming, when you sit in a pew and feel the gap between what is being preached and what you know to be true about yourself, your body, your love, your life, that is not a simple loss. It is a structural loss. You're not just leaving a building. You're leaving a whole world. For queer Caribbean women specifically, this loss has a particular sharpness because you are often asked, explicitly or implicitly, to choose between the community that raised you, the fullness of who you are, between belonging and integrity, between the version of you that was welcome and the version that is not. That is a devastating ask. And a lot of us spent years trying to find a way to not have to choose, trying to be enough of ourselves to survive while being enough of what they needed to stay. Living in the gap between those two things is exhausting in a way that is hard to describe to someone who hasn't done it. And then there's the wider community, the Caribbean diaspora community, the people who know your family, who knew you as a child, who carry a version of you that is fixed in time, who need you to stay legible to them, who read your growth as distance, your healing as arrogance, your becoming as a departure from something you should have stayed loyal to, the "you think you're better than us" wound. I want to name that specifically because I think it is one of the most painful and particular experiences of a Caribbean woman who grow, who heal, who dare to want something different from what was handed to them. You do not think you are better. You think you are different. You think you are allowed to be different, and those are not the same thing. But in communities where sameness is safety and difference is disloyalty, that distinction is hard to make heard. What I want to say to her is this: your growth is not a betrayal of where you came from. Your willingness to question, to seek, to become, that is not an ingratitude. It is the fruit of everything they gave you, even the painful parts. You did not grow despite your roots. You grew because of them. The roots are still there. They just aren't the whole tree anymore. I want to spend real time here, in the in-between, because I think it's the least talked about part of this whole experience, and the most people are actually living in it. The in-between is the stage where you know you have outgrown something, a friendship, a relationship, a community, a whole chapter of your life. The knowing is clear. It has been confirmed from multiple angles. Your body knows, your spirit knows, your therapist probably knows, but you haven't left yet. And the not yet leaving is not weakness or indecision. It is the normal human, incredibly complex experience of being in transition, of knowing where you are going while still standing in the place you are leaving, of grieving something that is still technically present and therefore impossible to fully mourn. The in-between has a particular loneliness to it because you are not fully in the old world anymore. You cannot unknow what you know, cannot unsee what you have seen, cannot go back to the version of yourself that fit comfortably in the space that now feels tight. But you're not fully in the new world either. You haven't yet built the community, the relationships, the sense of home that will hold the person you are becoming. You're between homes, and that is one of the loneliest places a person can be. What I want you to know right now, if you are in the in-between right now, is that in-between is not a failure. It is not a sign that something has gone wrong. It is the necessary passage between one version of your life and the next. Every significant growth has an in-between. Every meaningful transformation requires a period of not yet, of unclear, of standing in with one foot on either side of the line that is still being drawn. The in-between feels like being lost. It is not being lost. It is being between, and there is a difference. There are things that help in the in-between, not fixes. There are no shortcuts through it, but the things that make it more bearable, allowing yourself to grieve what you are leaving without having to be certain you are making the right choice. Finding even one person who is ahead of you in the passage, not to lead you, but just to confirm that there's another side. Releasing the expectation that the transition should be faster, cleaner, more decisive than it is. Grief does not have a schedule. Becoming does not have a deadline. And being honest with yourself, truly honest, about what you're holding on to and why, sometimes we stay in the in-between not because we don't know it's time, but because leaving feels like confirming a loss we are not yet ready to name. Sometimes the in-between is where we live, when we know the truth, but are not yet brave enough to act on it. That is human. That is not moral failing. It is just where you are, and you are allowed to be there for a while you gather what you need to keep moving. The grief of outgrowing people is strange, because it has no clear ritual. When someone dies, there are structures for the mourning. People gather, stories are told, the loss is named publicly and collectively, and the griever is held. But when you outgrow someone, when a friendship quietly ends, when a family relationship shifts into something more formal and distant, when a community you belong to no longer has room for who you are, there's no ceremony. The person is still there, still alive, still posting on social media, still at the family gathering. And the loss is real and significant and utterly unacknowledged by the world around you. That is a particular kind of lonely, grieving in private, grieving something you cannot fully explain to people who are still in the relationship and experience it differently. Grieving a future that will not exist. The future where you and this person, this community, this version of your life continued into the next chapter. I want to validate grief fully and completely. It is real. It counts. The fact that they are still alive does not mean you have not lost something. The fact that the relationship still technically exists in some form does not mean you are not allowed to mourn what it was, what it could have been, what you hoped it would become. You're allowed to grieve a living person. You're allowed to be sad about a relationship that changed, even if it needed to change. You're allowed to miss a community that could not hold you, even while knowing that community was not safe for the full version of you. Grief and rightness can coexist. The thing can be the right decision and still hurt. Those are not in contradiction. Let both be true. And here's something I've found to be true in my own experience and in the experience of women I've spoken to. The grief, when you let yourself feel it properly, has an end. Not an instant end, not a clean one, but it moves, it processes, it becomes something different, not gone, but transformed. It becomes the thing that lives in you quietly, the tender place that reminds you how much you love something, how much it mattered, even though it could not stay. That is not nothing. That is actually the fullness of a life that loved and lost and kept going. What I'm still figuring out is how to stop waiting for people to catch up. There's a version of love, and I think it comes from a good place, from genuine care, where you keep the door open so long it becomes its own kind of stuckness, where you hold space for possibility of reunion so continuously that you cannot fully move forward, where you are always half turned back, watching the horizon for the moment they arrive where you are. Some of them will arrive, some people will not. Some people who are not ready now will become ready later. Some relationships that cannot hold the current version of you will expand in time to hold more. I've seen that happen. It is real and it is beautiful when it does. But some won't. And learning to stop waiting for those ones, learning to turn fully forward without that constant glance back, is something I'm still practicing. The door can stay open without you standing in it. You can love someone from a distance without the distance being temporary. You can release a relationship without releasing the love. I'm also still learning how to build the new, because outgrowing is only half of the story. The other half is building new community, new relationships, new spaces where the current version of you is not only tolerated, but actively wanted. That building takes longer than the leaving. And in the gap between the leaving the old and finding the new, the loneliness can be significant. I'm in that building phase still. Some days it feels slow. Some days I catch a glimpse of the shape of what is coming, and it feels worth every complicated, grief-filled, in-between moment of getting here. Your invitation this week is one of the most honest things I will ask of you all season. I want you to name the in-between you are currently in. Not to anyone else, just to yourself. In your journal, in a voice note, in the shower where the words can dissolve before anyone hears them. Name what you are leaving. Name the relationship, the community, the chapter, the version of yourself that no longer fits. Say it clearly. Not things are changing. Be specific. Name the thing, and then name what you are grieving about it. Not what you are relieved about. There may be relief too, and that is also real. But the grief first, the loss first. What did you love about it? What did it give you? What future did you hope for that is no longer the future that is coming? Let yourself feel the sadness of that without immediately moving to the silver lining. The silver lining is real. It will be still there in 5 minutes, but the grief deserves its moment first. Give it the moment. You're allowed to be sad about leaving something, even when leaving was right. Both are true. Both deserve to be felt. That's episode 6 of Unapologetically Us. Real talk. No apologies. If this episode met you somewhere real, if you heard yourself in the in-between, in the grief of the living, in the loneliness of being ahead of where your people are, please share it. There is someone in your life who has been carrying this in silence, who does not have language for what they're feeling, who needs to know that the grief is real and it is allowed and they are not alone in it. Send it to her. It might be the most important thing you do this week. Come find me on YouTube, Spotify, and all other socials. They'll be in the description. Tell me about your in-between. Tell me who you're grieving. I'm here for all of it. The complicated, unresolved, still being processed parts included. Next week, money trauma and scarcity mindset. Because we have been talking about the emotional and relational cost of the lives we were handed. And now we are going into the financial ones. The money stories we absorbed before we knew we were absorbing them. The scarcity that lives in the body long after the bank account changes. That conversation is next. It is going to be important. Until then, honor the in-between you are in. It is not limbo. It is the passage. And you are moving through it, even on the days it doesn't feel that way. I'm Neeka. This is Unapologetically Us. Real talk, no apologies. I'll see you next week.